thank you all for coming to my talk. I originally did want to do like a demo, but I've had disastrous results trying to demo stuff at talks. So this is more going to be like a case for procedural environment art. I'm going to kind of go through some steps on some of the ways that you do work in a couple of the programs. So it's not like a live demo because I've had disasters with that. But I'm going to show you some stuff inside some software that I like to use for doing this kind of stuff. So, who am I? A little bit about me. Why should you listen to me? I do have a BS in media arts and animation, and I worked 7 years full-time as an environment artist, level designer, depending on the studio you work at. Sometimes they get kind of cross-pollinated. But I've been in the trenches. I've been there. So a lot of this is, some of it is from past experience, because I have been teaching at Wake Tech for about 5 years now, and I've recently became an assistant professor. I was an instructor for a while, and I am working towards my associates in computer programming. So I started as an artist, so for all of those other artists out there who are scared of programming, this is kind of one of those talks to tell you that programming is not scary. You can do it as an artist, and it's really important. You can do really awesome stuff with your art if you know how to program. And I am a compulsive new skill learner. I'm the person in the department who finds cool new things and says, hey, we need to teach this to our students because this is really cool, this is really important, and I can't help myself sometimes. But that's a whole other conversation of what I want to learn next. But I did want to talk a little bit about first what traditional environment art workflow is, so that we can kind of compare it to like a procedural workflow, because there are some corollaries, but there's, we can talk a little about the advantages and disadvantages of both. So I assume there's environment artists out there, yes? So a lot of this is familiar to you. And again, it depends on the studio you work at, where it's some of the steps might be combined, or you do things in a little bit different order. But generally, when you're going to make an environment for a game, you do your layout, concept art, and look for reference images. And then you start viewing your basic block out in your engine of choice, because you want to get that kind of sorted out. Sometimes a level designer will do this, not an environment artist, but again, depends on the studio, so that you can hand this off to someone, they can test it, and make sure that what you're planning on does work well, and the engine's not too big, not too small. And once your basic block out is done, you start making refined assets, such as better walls, better materials, all of your placement objects. And then you start putting that into your engine, import it in, place it in. And generally you do testing and fix issues as you're going, but if you've ever worked in in a studio, you'll have your layouts approved, you'll have your environments approved at your basic blockout stage, and then your art director comes up when you're in the middle of finishing up all of your wall models and say, well, you know what? Your walls are a little bit too big. We need it to be a little bit smaller. Can you go back and fix everything? And if you've done that, it's a huge pain to go in and remove things around. Even in a modular environment, if you have to manually go in and fix that, it's not a lot of fun. Or if your walls are too thick or too thin, or it's just something's off with that, or they don't like your materials, go in and fix those. So some advantages, though, to the traditional workflow is it's very fast to prototype at the start. It's very easy to get your blockouts done. It's very easy just to kind of get things started. And pretty much every studio uses this pipeline, so it's already established. Everyone knows how to use this. So if you're trying to do a smaller game and you just want to get something out of there, you probably want to go with more of a traditional sort of workflow. There's also a lot of software choices. I mean, you could pick up Blender and use Unity and I guess GIMP, and they're all kind of free, and make a game out of it. Since it's well established, there's a lot of other software to choose from if you need to. And you can easily customize high or low level of detail as you're designing it. And it's infinite customizability. So you can make little changes here and there pretty much on the fly if you need to. It's very easy. Some disadvantages, and again, if you're an environment artist, you probably hit all of these before. It's difficult to make changes once more refined art is put in. Like if you already have your environments modeled, unwrapped, textured, lit, and you have to go in and make some major changes to it because you found out that your rooms are too big or they're too tall or it's just not the right kind of look to it. It's very difficult to go back and fix it. Like it's time consuming. And it can be difficult to maintain a consistent art style when you're working in a large team environment because everyone has to kind of keep everything looking the same. And that can be kind of difficult. And world building can be time consuming. You can get a job just as a world builder where your job is just to go around and place all of the chairs, place all of the rocks, place all those little tiny things that you see in the game. It's tedious and it has to get done. And this is kind of some of those disadvantages is where proceduralism comes into place. And a lot of places use a lot of different words. I couldn't really find an established word for what this talk is about, like in procedural environment creation, procedural modeling, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of went with proceduralism as like a general sort of term. So the way proceduralism works is rather than the traditional way where you're creating specific objects and materials, instead you create a system with rules set up. And as an artist, you can use the system of rules to generate what they need in an environment as long as the system is set up for it. So you'll have like a system set up for like a specific type of wall. And your artist will go in and in the game engine, Unity, Unreal, whatever, you can draw your outline of where your wall where your wall should be, and it'll generate your wall for you. So rather than focusing solely on placing each individual wall piece, you can focus more on adjusting the placement and stuff like that. And this is usually tech artists set this up, but I feel that this is stuff that is doable by other artists. And this is kind of a way to show you that it's not that hard, and it is, if you want to be an environment artist, this is where I feel the industry is moving towards because you can get a lot more work done with a little bit of front-end setup. And it's a lot of fun. Like if you've done this kind of stuff before and you start to see this work, it's pretty amazing. I'm starting to teach this to students in one of my classes, and we did one demo, and I just started showing them like the customizability of it. I just saw the eyes light up. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's what you can do with it. So it's really kind of neat stuff. So one thing I have run into talking to other artists about this is they're scared usually about losing their jobs. They're worried that they will no longer have employment because the computer will do it for them. And I don't want you guys to be scared of this kind of new technology. This has happened in other media where lots of stuff has been kind of, in a way, proceduralized. For instance, we don't have a lot of portrait painters anymore. No one really goes to get their portrait painted. They have photographers instead because it does a better job, it's faster, and you get a much better image out of it. We don't have scribes anymore. The printing press kind of got rid of scribes, and now we even have word processors to take care of that. And kind of also talking about in the 3D aspect is there have been a lot of advancements in UV unwrapping tools since even I started 3D modeling that it kind of automates the process, and you never would want to get rid of those. This saves a lot of time. Yeah, I see a lot of smiles. Like, no, I need my UV unwrapping tools. I don't want to hand to do that stuff anymore. And this is kind of similar to that. So to go into some procedural modeling, the one software I'm going to talk about that is Houdini by Side Effects. I don't know if anyone's heard of Houdini. I think it's magic. I guess that's why they call it Houdini. And this started out as being used for VFX. Like, it was mostly used in like the movie industry to do like particles and fire and like really amazing stuff. But now they're using it more for, like, you can use it now also for that, but they're moving into the realm of modeling, animation, rigging, and engine plugins. So it's not just for movies anymore. They've moved into games as well. And I focus on it mostly for doing like the modeling and engine plugin stuff. So if you want to talk about like the rigging and stuff, like I'm not an animator, I'm an environment artist. And you can get a free version of this. So this is software you can go out there right now and download and try for free, but if you want to plug it actually into the Unreal or Unity engine, you have to pay for that. So that's how they kind of get you a little bit. But it will work. It does work pretty seamlessly once you have those plugins. So a little bit before you start on this, like it can be a little bit intimidating. So these are some skills I feel that as long as you have these, you should be able to kind of get into this program without too much difficulty. You should have an understanding of 3D modeling terminology, like what is a normal, like stuff like that. You should have an understanding of what all those terms mean, which if you're already doing 3D art, like you know that stuff. You should understand traditional 3D modeling techniques. What is UV unwrapping, you know, what is like a, you know, what are vertices, what are polygons, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're already in the field, those two are done. Basic programming concepts. This is the one that usually scares a lot of artists. You don't have to be amazing programmers to understand how this stuff works. If you know what if statements are, if you can do, you know, logic, like, you know, greater than, less than, just basic programming concepts. If you want an engine to study, I'd study Python. It's a very easy language to get into. And Houdini, actually, you can do some mild scripting in Python itself. But if you really don't want to get into that aspect of it, you can still get a lot as long as you understand some programming concepts. And you do need to know a little bit of algebra and geometry. But again, if you're already doing environment art, you have algebra and geometry knowledge in your head, even if you're not aware of that, like, you know, how many degrees is half the circle, like stuff like that, just to make your life a little bit easier. So this is the Houdini layout, if you've never seen it before. And it does kind of look like a traditional 3D modeling package. You do have your viewport right here. And the way that this works is you have containers, like geometry containers, that hold like your pieces. So like if you were using 3ds Max and you make a box, that's what this kind of thing here, right, is would be like your specific model. And you can have multiple models in your scene. And this is your panel that you can adjust basic settings on it. So like by default, like if you mess with, for instance, the translate, the rotate scale, it'll just move this box around. So to actually get into and change this, you go into your model and you start getting a node-based system, which is a lot of fun. And the way this kind of works is this is why you need to know traditional modeling before you can really get into it, is you have to know how to model, and you just kind of break it more down into like a node sort of way. So for instance, I kind of go through making a very basic wall, like you'd see like around a castle, like with some thickness, and you can kind of trace around with it. So if you wanted to build a very basic wall, you would start with a line. And this is broken up into 3 different pieces just to give it some more customizability, and that'll come into play later. Where you have a bottom line, that's this node right here, a midline, and a trim line. So the trim is the top, mid and middle, bottom at the bottom. And I just gave it some color nodes just to give it some color because it'll look nice later on. And we merge these all together, and you end up with a line with segments in specific spots. So very easy, it's just a line right now. The next stage, I guess that might be a little hard to see, is you just take that line, you duplicate it, and then you make 2 lines connecting the top and the bottom, so you're pretty much making like a box. And these are similar nodes, just copy to point, merging things together, not anything too complicated here yet. And then you use a sweep node when you have your line to sweep along the path. And kind of, if you've ever used 3ds Max, you've used like a loft tool where you draw your line and you lock the shape, same kind of concept. But this is where it becomes a lot of fun. This is the path that I drew for this, and this is the part that you would do in your game engine. So you would set this part up in Houdini, and obviously you can add some more detail to it, but I wanted to do a very simple kind of example. So, and you would import this system into Unity, for instance. I use this in Unity because I prefer Unity myself. In Unity, you would have the ability then, using the Houdini plugin, to draw your line in the engine, and then it will generate that wall along it. So rather than having to make corner pieces, rather than having to figure out all of those segments, you draw your line and you're done, which is a lot faster than if you've ever had to place wall segments. I see my students shaking their head, yes, yes. And the fun part doesn't stop there. I think this is a lot of fun, but you can expose parameters in the engine so that you can, you expose them in Houdini so that you can see them in, for instance, the Unity engine. So if you remember I said we have like the bottom line, the midline, and the top line. I exposed the lengths of those so that you would get the slider then in Unity. So if you wanted to, for instance, make it a little bit taller, make it a little bit wider, you don't have to go back into Houdini. You can just give this system to your artists to play around with. And you can change things, like I made it fatter, I actually did make it a little bit taller, it's kind of hard to see. But you can expose any kind of thing you want. So there's a lot of ways you can, lost my train of thought. If you design this system, you can give it to someone else and they can make a lot of interesting things on their own. They don't have to come back to you, go into your Houdini stuff. But this is, like I said, this is stuff usually a tech artist does. But if you're a 3D artist, this isn't that difficult. Like you can put nodes down for lines and sweeps and stuff like that and set this up so that you can have some, fun on your own as well. This is an example of, I took that line and I just bent it around, and it'll instantly update to the new shape of your stuff. So if your art director comes up to you and says, don't really like that shape, can you adjust it? You say, come back in like 15 minutes. Instead of that, he or she can stand right there and you can just move it around until it gets the perfect shape so you're not wasting a bunch of time. Not that I'm talking from experience or anything, but. So that was a little bit about Houdini. And I do want to talk a little about procedural textures. And this is, if you've kind of kept up with industry stuff, this is something that you might be familiar with, is Substance Designer. Has anyone used Substance Designer in here? Yes, it is amazing. And I wish more people would get into it. It is part of the Substance Suite. And it is a 3D material authoring tool. So if you haven't used Designer, you most likely use at least or played around with Substance Painter. And if you have all those really fun like wood nodes and metal nodes, this is the program that you can design your own materials for Painter, or you can just do it all in Designer itself if you wanted to. So it is another node-based system. They love making node-based systems for us artists, which I don't mind. I love node-based systems myself. And it allows the author to expose parameters to the user to allow them to control the final look of their material. So again, if you've used Painter and you use, like, I think it's like cherry wood, you have the ability to change the color, you have the ability to change like how much wood grain there are. You can set that up in Designer yourself. Kind of similar to how in Houdini you can expose your parameters to change heights and stuff like that. So proceduralism is definitely a lot about giving a lot of control and like picking and choosing, what needs to be changed. And the most amazing part about Substance Designer is all of the textures are scalable in size and resolution. Which, hooray, that's amazing. You don't accidentally make something in a 512 by 512 and find out it needs to be a 1024 and you have to go back and make your textures later. So you can make it at one size, make it smaller, make it bigger, it doesn't matter. Since it's all procedurally generated, you're not doing the traditional like hand painting textures, it's all done with nodes. So before you start, have an understanding of what a PBR material is. Know what roughness is, know what metallic is, because that's what you're going to be working with. And you should understand Photoshop pretty well, which if you already are an environment artist, I assume that you are probably an expert at Photoshop, because that's what everyone uses. And having some Painter does help. I went from Painter to Designer, and I understood Designer a lot better because I worked with Painter. And now I understand Painter a lot better because I worked with Designer after with that. And obviously you understand 3D modeling techniques. So if you're going to get into proceduralism, this is probably the one that's going to be the most easiest for artists to attempt at first. So this is the designer layout if you've never seen it before. Again, a lot of times when you open up a program for the first time, it can be very intimidating. And I kind of wanted to show it and kind of go over a couple of things just so you might be more apt to go in and try it yourself. It's broken up into a couple areas. This 3D cube demonstrates what your final material looks like. And when you first open it up, you don't have anything, so it's just a big blank shiny cube. Over here on the right, you have your parameters for each of the nodes that you can change. And over here, this is your graph for what is going on in your material. The top one is usually your color or albedo. Then you have your normal. You have your roughness map. You have your metallic, that's right, metallic one. And underneath they usually throw a height map in, even though if you're doing games you might not use a height map because you don't want to bring in just another texture into your stuff. But you do have the ability to add other maps like your emissive map, your transparency map. So this is just the base that you start with when you open the program. And usually when you start, you want to throw in a couple things just to get going. I just threw in a couple of quick ones just to kind of show again. Base color, normal map, roughness map, it doesn't look metallic, and I'm not going to use the height map, so this is just some really simple ones thrown in there. But the workflow is very similar to how you would work on a model in a way, because it works better to start with your normal map. So think about like you're trying to construct your geometry. Obviously it's a normal map, you're not actually changing the shape of it, but you do got to figure out what's going to be higher, what's going to be lower, because this is going to affect all of your other maps. This is usually you get the best results if you start with your normal map. And I do just have a really simple flat color going in, very simple roughness going in, just like as a dummy, just for later those are going to change. And I did finish up the metallic note because this isn't going to be a metallic texture, so it is what it is. It's black. It doesn't need any metallicness to it. But I made like a rubber sort of material, like a rubber mat you see on the floor. And it just starts off with a shape node, fed into a title generator, fed into a height map to normal node, into the normal. And all of this is already in the editor for you. So I'm not going to actually import anything in. This is all going to be procedurally generated. So easy enough, 3 nodes, not too bad. Next, you usually want to work on your base color. Base color can be a little bit more detailed than your other ones, just because generally you don't want really flat colors. Nothing in the real world is a very flat color. It all has some kind of variation to it. So I do feed into some of my normal map nodes into here because you can kind of recycle some of these where this can be like a mask for putting base colors, so I can have like grungy stuff put on underneath the parts that are raised. Because if you're trying to make something gross and realistic, that's how the real world wears down. And the nice thing about this too is if you kind of call back nodes that you've already used, if for some reason we decide I don't want it to be a square at all, I want it to be more of like I don't want it to be circle, I want it to be like a square sort of raised part. We could go back and change the shape to a square, and it'll repopulate back through all the nodes it's connected to and automatically change it. So you don't have to go back and do a lot of extra work. It's just a couple of clicks to see if you like it or not. So again, if your art director comes up and says, I don't really like the circles, can you do like plus signs instead? It's like, okay, I guess it'll take me a whole day. No, it'll just take a couple seconds to change out a shape and you're done, which saves a lot of time. And these correlate pretty well to if you've ever used Photoshop layers. So for instance, a lot of these, like right here, these are blend nodes. So I have like a base layer that's like the blue color, and I have Another node that's meant to do kind of like a, I think it does like a little bit of like a lighter ring. It's very faint around it, but it gives a little bit of wear and tear. And I did like a, basically like a lighten on top of it. Like same thing as changing a layer to like a lighten layer. So if you're really familiar with Photoshop, this is really easy to get into because it all kind of comes back. It's just a node-based system rather than a layer-based system. After you get your color done, you then usually move on to your roughness map. Because again, a lot of your previous nodes are going to feed into those nodes. And again, if you make changes early on, it'll populate all the way through and automatically update for you. And ultimately, you end up with something like this, which if you were to paint by hand or like get a bunch of source images and kind of put it together, it wouldn't take too long, but the strength comes in with the customizability. So we could expose parameters to, we could put this in an engine, or if it supports substance materials, or if you send this over to Painter, and for instance, allow the user to change the color. So if you want, say, a red mat rather than a blue mat, you can let them change the color. Or potentially like change the shape of it so they can make their own kind of nubs on the mat that aren't circle. It could be another unique shape of theirs. So some advantages of this kind of system. Changes to the system can update what has been implemented in the game. So if you, for instance, if we talk about kind of both of Houdini and Designer, if you make, like, for instance, a wall with a baseboard and your art director comes back and says, well, I want the baseboard to actually look like this. If you go and you change your system and you import that new system into your game engine, it can auto-update everything, so you don't have to go back and fix it all. It'll kind of auto-fix it for you. World building is significantly faster. I only kind of touched briefly on some possibilities you can do with Houdini. The one thing that I think is absolutely amazing that you can use it for is you can build a pipe system. So who's ever built pipes on walls? You know, you got your one piece, you got your corner piece, you got your T piece, and you have to sit there and place them all, and they have to line up. You can build a system where you just draw the line again, and it will auto-generate your pipe for you. So you, rather than spending like an hour placing pipes on walls, you can just draw your line and it's done. Which again is amazing. Saves a lot of time. HVAC systems. Pretty much any kind of environment where everything can be made into a system in some kind of way. You can even use it for stuff like populating random rocks in a field. So rather than like individually placing rocks, you can actually import in 3D models and say, randomly rotate this rock, place it here, you know, and it'll rotate them so you get different sides and randomly generate them in a space for you. Again, saving you a lot of time. And since world building is significantly faster, again, a lot of environment artists get scared they're going to lose their job. But I say this is a lot better because you can spend more time on the big picture rather than minute details. Because who really wants to place 100 rocks? I would rather try to make it, you know, spend more time making a better material, making it look better, making it look more, or run more efficient than placing 100 rocks in the field. It's also easier to iterate on. So if you have like one wall system in place, you could always duplicate it, make some adjustments, and have a little bit of a different sort of looking wall as well. And you can reuse these systems with minor changes in different projects. So if you have a wall that you just love, no reason why you can't put that in another project. If you have like a good door and window system, no reason you can't use that in this project and that project. So it's easy to duplicate and just, for instance, change your material on it instead. There are disadvantages to it. The first one is the time needed for initial setup of systems. So while traditional method is very easy to just quickly drop some blocks in and you can test it out, you do have to kind of have some pre-production where you're setting up, excuse me, all of like your algorithms for your walls and stuff like that. So that does take a lot of time. There's not a lot of free options out there. Like I said, you can use GIMP, Blender, and like that kind of stuff for a traditional method. But if you want to use Houdini, sorry, I forgot my water. Excuse me. You're gonna have to pay for it, and for indie studios, that's sometimes not a very good. You can't. You don't have the money. Same thing for designer. It's still new technology, so it is a little bit buggy, and not a lot of people know how to use it, so you might not have it built into your pipeline yet. It can also be harder to create highly detailed scenes when you're first starting out, so that can be a bit of a sorry, like a deterrent for some people, because you have to learn how to use it before you can make some really nice looking stuff. And it can be really hard to do specifically unique environments. While you can do kind of like a hybrid system where you do some traditional modeling and import it in, until you get really good at it, it can be difficult. And while we said like if you can make changes to fix and update things, if you make the wrong changes, it can have unintended ripple effects throughout your whole system. Like if someone messes something up, it could break your game. Sorry. So I do have some resources if you are interested. I know it's kind of lame to say go to YouTube, but there's a lot of really good videos on there for learning this stuff. Specifically, if you want to learn Houdini, they have a lot of good resources on their website. They recently came out, and I'm frustrated they didn't come out like 6 months ago when I could have used it to start to work on making some stuff for my classes. But Side Effects just released like a startup guide on how to use their stuff that's really well done. And Algorithmic has a lot of their own really well done tutorials. Game Tutor has a lot of stuff for Houdini. Like they have a specific Houdini section. And if you do have a Pluralsight or Lynda account, there are a lot of really good tutorials on there. Between Side Effects, the Algorithmic site, Game Tutor, Pluralsight, and Lynda, that's pretty much how I learned all this software because I didn't learn it in school at all. And if you do have a Gnomon workshop subscription, they have some really neat videos too. So that's all I had. Are there any questions? Yes?
How detailed are you able to get with the models that you're going to be creating in Houdini?
So, yes, how detailed can you get in Houdini? You can go pretty far with it, but again, it's because you can kind of do like your 3D modeling, but again, there's a little bit of a learning curve to it because while it is kind of similar to traditional, you have to learn how to use all the nodes because it's a little bit interesting. But as a good starting off point, if you're still kind of learning, I do suggest trying to do like a hybrid approach where you do some more complex models, say in 3ds Max, and you can import those in and use them. So like if you've modeled, say if you're doing like a pipe system and you have like your connection pieces, like you might consider modeling that connection piece, but then having it generate the actual pipe itself. Just, with like same thing like with the sweep on a circle on a line, just so that it can speed up the process a little bit until you're more familiar with it. Yes?
So I'm a dev, right? I'm an artist.
Okay.
So where do you think would be a good starting point to kind of learn the concepts? Like, I understand the coding, the procedural generation part.
Yeah.
But where do you think I should go to learn the concepts from the art standpoint? Like, where would be a good starting point?
Well, it depends on how much art you have. If you have at least some Photoshop experience and you have some understanding, I would maybe start with the designer stuff because that might be more familiar to you. Because since it's more node-based, if you've ever seen Substance Painter, it's more of like that's a very artsy tool where you have your stuff you're painting on it. Where designer, it's all just placing nodes, and like you don't necessarily have to do you can that texture I generated. It's all from clicking things. Like I didn't have to draw a single thing, which I think is I think is a lot more fun sometimes for programmers who are a little intimidated from the art standpoint. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
We're talking about You're talking about how you could draw out shape of the walls and stuff like that.
Yes.
Could you potentially do that for bodies of water and what there's
Yeah, the Houdini stuff also, like I said, it started as a VFX thing, so you can do like effects like that with that too. I don't know specifically about like water stuff, because usually engines have a pretty good handle of that themselves. But yeah, it has wider, because I should have turned it on, but I had like you can generate terrain in Houdini and do stuff like that as well, because the way that wall system actually works is it will follow the terrain line. So like if you have a hill, it'll go up the hill and down it as well, because you can set that up. I wanted to kind of keep it simple for the demonstration. Other questions? Yes?
So Houdini can work as a white box equals, also you're saying, correct?
A little bit, yeah, but generally you can get, if you want to give it out for other people to also work with, it's usually easier just to push it out to like Unity or something like that to let them play with it in a way.
You had mentioned that you can actually like draw those like curves or
Yes.
blocks in the end.
Yes, because if you pay for the plugin, you get this little, like a Unity package that you import into your environment, and it gives you another little drop down, and you have like it's called a curve, and you draw a curve, and then you can associate that with your tool, your Houdini tool, and it'll take that curve and just draw it on. Yeah, it's amazing. It's magic. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Do you know roughly how much those plugins cost?
No, because my school pays for it. It's not like thousands of dollars. I think it's a subscription based thing, and I want to say, I'm sure someone has the internet and could look it up really quick.
$200 a year.
$200 a year. Okay, something like that. Yeah. So it's reasonable, but they are a Canadian studio. I met them at GDC. They're very nice. Other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Hopefully you're not scared anymore. It's a lot of fun, trust me.